In this lecture, we're going to be talking about germ theory and human impacts of microbes, right? While most microbes out there are either neutral or positive for human health, we obviously have had some bad luck when it comes to microbes in our history, right? We have a number of pathogens that have been pretty significant throughout human history, and so we have built up ways of dealing with those, right? And keeping ourselves as a species healthy. And, there are things that are passed down culturally. There are also things that we evolved to deal with these microbes that can take advantage of us and potentially cause disease. And so we're going to be talking explicitly about the germ theory to some extent here. You may be familiar with it, may not, but we'll do a little review over that, and then we'll talk about some other ways that microbes impact human health. All right. Now, before we knew about germs, we had something called the miasma theory. So miasma theory was this theory that infectious disease, was caused by these wandering sort of floating clouds of poisonous vapors, or miasmas. This is something that came from the Greeks long time ago. And essentially, I think what probably happened was we had people who were sick, dying, and often there would be terrible odors that would come from this. When a body is rotting, obviously, you have a terrible smell in a lot of cases. And I think people kind of made the connection between these terrible smells, things like sewers, right? You can get sick from a sewer. And you can get sick from other things that are, having problems with gastrointestinal issues and this kind of thing. So there was this connection made between bad smell and, well, rather than that was caused by the sickness, that must have caused the sickness. And so this video right here, you should actually probably go and watch. I'm not going to play it on here, but it is it goes through, it does a pretty good job of talking about this one story in London back in the 1800s, and a particular scientist who was trying to disprove the idea of miasma theory, and was able to demonstrate that cholera, was a cholera outbreak it was killing people off very, very quickly. Cholera outbreak in London was caused by contaminated drinking water rather than miasmas, right? So I'll pause here a second for you to go and watch this video. And now I'm hoping that you're back now and you've watched the video. Let's go on to the next piece, all right? So we have this germ theory, all right? So the idea of germ theory is that germs or microbes cause disease, not miasmas, all right? And so these sorts of microorganisms we call pathogens. And so these are living organisms or even non-living organisms that are they're at least of biological origin. These microbes, when they get inside a human being or other living organism, cause disease, problems. Some of the biggest players in history are things like the bubonic plague, killed off 2/3 of Europe. This is caused by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. Cholera, which hopefully you just saw in the video there, is caused by Vibrio cholerae. It's kind of hard to see it, but it's actually a spiral-looking bacteria. This is something that gets in your gut, causes extreme vomiting and diarrhea, and people more or less die from dehydration, often with a couple days. All right, some others, yeast. Candida auris is a emerging pathogen of concern. It's a yeast that causes infections, and it's becoming resistant to a lot of our antifungals. And it's becoming a big problem in a lot of hospitals and other nursing care areas and things like that. And then one of the worst pathogens on the planet is malaria. Kills off millions of people every year. It is actually a protist, and it attacks red blood cells, hangs out in red blood cells, and causes disease from there. All right, so those are some of our living pathogens. We also have non-living pathogens, and that's our viruses. And here are some fairly terrifying ones: Ebola, rabies, SARS-CoV-2, that was COVID. These have kind of evolved into being not as much a concern as they were when we first had the outbreak, but these are all pretty serious pathogens of human beings. All right. Now, the idea behind germ theory then was that infectious disease was caused by these microbes. It's caused by microbes, microorganisms, not these miasmas. All right. Now, in order for us to deal with pathogens like this, there is a number of different ways that our bodies and culture help keep us, well, from getting sick. All right. We have one major part of this is called our immune system. All right. We are not helpless when it comes to microorganisms. In fact, the majority of things that we come in contact with do not make us sick. And so I'm just going to go through a couple of different, like kind of the four pieces here of immunity. So first off, we have our innate immunity. This is something that we're born with, requires no experience, all right? And these are things like barriers and inflammation and cells, enzymes. These are all things that will attack pathogens or anything trying to get into our bodies, regardless of what it is. So one of the first things we try to do is keep pathogens from entering the body in the first place. We do this with our skin. Our skin is our biggest immune system organ, right? And it does a pretty good job of keeping most stuff out. We also have places, though, where things have to get in and out. I mean, we got to eat and poop and otherwise, right? So we have mucous membranes in places where we have openings into the body. These are moist areas that often have enzymes, other antimicrobial substances there, some cells crawling through it, and anything that might get in there, they're going to try to kill it off before it gets into the body. Doesn't stop everything, though. So we do have some organisms that get into the body. Then come our immune cells. So our immune system cells, we have several that will come along, and their job is to kill foreign pathogens. One of the most important things that your immune system has to learn is what belongs in your body and what does not. Self versus non-self, right? And this is important because they need to try to kill these foreign pathogens that get inside the body before they replicate to the point where they take over and kill us, right? So how do we do this? Well, they come along and they just basically test things, feel on the outside, looking for signals that something belongs to the body. If those signals aren't there, they will take it, ingest it, so eat it, break it down, and then they'll take pieces of those germs and put them on, more or less, on the outside of the cell as what we call antigens. So an antigen is anything, any substance or physical thing, I should say, that your immune system will respond to. So it puts these on the surface. Your other immune cells will come along, recognize them, and they'll start producing something called antibodies. Antibodies are proteins that are specific to certain antigens, and your body will start producing those in mass in response to infections. All right, so the first part is you got a bunch of these immune cells coming along and trying to kill off as many viruses or bacteria or whatever it is as possible. At the same time, they're also calling for reinforcements, getting these other cells, I think they're B cells, to start making these antibodies. Antibodies start getting produced in bulk during this time period. It takes a couple days, and they will start attaching to any of these pathogens that might happen to be in the body. Once they're attached there, it keeps things from viruses and bacteria and viruses from getting into cells, keeps them from replicating, and also is a flag for other immune cells to come along and kill them off. And so this is why many of our diseases take a couple days for us to get better from. Our antibodies, it takes a little while to mount this antibody response, and then boom, we get a immune response and kill off whatever it is that came in. Then the last bit is that our body will produce antibodies for long after the pathogen is gone, and they'll just kind of hang out. If they ever bump into something that they recognize again, the body will remount an immune response and kill it off. This is why you don't get sick right away, again, after getting better or getting over something else. It's not like you're not exposed to it again. In fact, you might very well be exposed to it, but your body is already ready to kill it off. So in order to help out our immune systems, there's a number of different things that we do, right? We as human beings have learned some things behaviorally and otherwise where we can help out our immune systems win in this battle. One of the first ones is just reducing exposure, right? So if we look back here, keeping pathogens from the body, well, this is one of the things we were concentrated on in COVID, wearing things like masks, social distancing, that sort of thing, washing hands. So one of the biggest boons for public health is having clean water sources and a way of getting rid of sewage. If you can have any connection between sewage and the drinking water, things like cholera in England will happen, all right? Cholera like we saw in London in the 1800s, all right? So one of the reasons we don't have things like cholera very frequently, or at least by us, is that, well, we keep our food and poo or water at least, away from each other. We also have food standards. So we have lots of laws regarding the handling of food. When you go to the grocery store, you expect that you are going to have safe food. Things are heated up and we kill off all the microbes. We call that pasteurization. We also use aseptic techniques, things like washing hands, sterilizing tools. If you go to the dentist and they're going to clean your teeth, they pull the new tools that they're going to get out of a new clean bag that has been sterilized. And then gloves and masks. All of these are ways to keep us from picking up viruses or bacteria from our environments. So that's one of the first ways. Well, sometimes, again, we do get infected. And it used to be that there wasn't a whole lot that we could do to deal with things like a bacterial infection. Well, science has helped in this. In fact, one of the major developments, one of the miracle drugs of the 1900s was penicillin, all right, and antibacterials in general. Fleming, I think it was Alexander Fleming, was the scientist who was growing up plates of bacteria, and he got an contamination by some mold. The mold, he noticed the bacteria wouldn't grow close to the mold. He thought, I wonder what's going on with that. Tested and isolated a compound that he could then test on bacteria, and turns out it killed them off, right? It stopped them from building cell walls, I think is what penicillin does. Sometimes some other ones that we've discovered since then block ribosomes, will disrupt DNA replication, something like this, all right? So these antimicrobials disrupt processes in living cells, all right? And because of this, they're able to stop bacteria from growing. So this is one way that we can help ourselves out. If we get sick, we can take antibiotics. Antibiotics disrupt these processes, but only do it for prokaryotes. And so for the most part, the prokaryotes in our body, and people used to assume that all the prokaryotes in our body would be bad. And so we take our antimicrobials and it kills them all off, which is, people used to die from bacterial infections all the time. It doesn't happen as much anymore. And part of that is because of these drugs, all right? Now, these only work on living organisms, so they don't work on viruses. So it doesn't make any sense to take an antimicrobial if an antibacterial, an antibiotic for a virus. A virus is not a living organism, all right? So there doesn't have these living processes happening inside the cell. Instead, we need other things called antivirals to take care of that. There's another problem here too, and that is that antibacterials target all bacteria, good and bad, kills off everything, all right? And so that can be problematic when it comes to the good bacteria that are living on our bodies and otherwise. Now, one of the things that has happened, and you should watch this video right here because it does a pretty good job of talking about it, is that we have used antibiotics too much. We assume that any bacteria were bad bacteria and that we should just kill them all off, right? Well, it turns out that This was a problematic way of looking at things. Now, what happens when you use antibiotics is that, let's say we have a situation, we got some bacteria. We Some of them are just the regular old bacteria, they're sensitive to antibiotic. Others have a gene in there that allows them to live even when they're given the antibiotic. All right, even in the presence of it. These sorts of resistance genes then allow bacteria to, when they are exposed to the antibiotic, a few of them will survive. Now, normally these bacteria would be at a disadvantage. It takes energy often to fight off an antibiotic. So if the antibiotic's not there, you don't need to spend that energy. But these ones have the genes and they're expressing them. They don't do as well normally. However, if you create a selective environment where the antibiotic is around, you have now made it so the conditions really favor these antibiotic resistant microbes. Then we get a situation where they grow up, the other ones all die off as long as you have the antibiotic in the area, as long as you keep the exposure, prolonged exposure. And eventually, over time, you get colonies of these things. And then the little buggers will take and share DNA with other bacteria that have never been exposed. And so what we end up having is a situation where bacteria have become resistant to antibiotics. And it is a serious problem. Things like penicillin barely work anymore. All right. We have to keep up making new antibiotics all the time because bacteria are getting these antimicrobial resistance genes and passing them to others. This is a major issue, and this video talks about some of this, but yeah, it's going to be a problem, and it's been a problem for some time. We have a lot of antimicrobial resistance superbugs that are really a pretty major problem for some people. So, antibiotics are a miracle drug. When we use them too much, we run the risk of making them no longer effective in human health, at least. All right, I'm gonna go one more here. Vaccines. This is the other way we help our bodies. So what a vaccine is, it tricks our system, tricks our immune system into thinking that it has already been exposed to a particular disease. And because of this, then we develop these antibodies that are in our body, that flowing through our blood, that can then recognize that disease if we were actually exposed to it. All right, it is basically training, it's scouting. For example, the flu. We know that we're going to be exposed to the flu. We take a flu vaccine, which allows then our bodies to see that flu, potentially the types of flu that we're going to see each year, and get ready for it. And so we put some sort of it's either a killed virus, not all viruses aren't dead, but inactivated, you should say, virus. The flu shot, rabies, polio, all those use a killed virus, inactivated virus. Put it in the body mounts an immune response, and then later, if we actually see it, then it kills it off. You can also use a live or active, but non-pathogenic virus, which shares almost all the same characteristics. So you still amount of response and develop the immunity, but it doesn't actually hurt you. All right. So the MMR, so measles, mumps, rubella vaccine that you've probably all been exposed to, chickenpox, all of these use live weakened virus. And then we have our mRNA. mRNA viruses were being developed for 20, 30 years before COVID. COVID gave us an opportunity in order to test out these types of vaccines, and it turns out that they actually work pretty well. In terms of longevity, it doesn't seem like we are maintaining the immunity as well, but they worked very well at keeping people from getting sick. And so ultimately, vaccines are one of the triumphs of human society, right? There has been some controversy. Mostly, a guy published a paper back 20, 30 years ago, which purported that there was a link between vaccines and autism. Turns out he made up all his data. Unscrupulous. He's been more or less thrown out of the medical profession. And the paper, what happened was people tried for decades to try to figure out what the link was between the two. It turned out there was no link. And so, however, the damage has been done. There's a lot of people in a lot of places that do not trust vaccines anymore. And then we had a lot of craziness that came out during COVID. So vaccines, as far as science is concerned, are one of our most amazing achievements and are one of the most important ways that we fight disease with public health. But that's all I'm going to talk about it for right now. We will talk a little bit more about some of this germ theory and how it illustrates the nature of science in another video. All right, that's it.